And we are live. Hi, everybody. Let me make sure that y'all can see. Looks like y'all can see. Okay, pop out chat. It just keeps telling me there's a bunch of new moderation tools. Congratulations. Ray, good to glad to have you. Althea, good to glad to have you. Bramble, good to glad to have you. Infinite, good to glad to have you. Laffy, good to glad to have you. Sarah, good to glad to have you. Okay, y'all. Yeah. So we're going to get back to our Encyclopedia Eorzea Volume 1 streams. Sorry, obviously, we've been away for the past 2 or 3 weeks. I've been simultaneously focusing on other real-life things, and then I turned 30, and then also I have been working on shorts and videos. I'm working on an electro video, actually, right now. Let me turn on some music, because silence is perturbing. Spotify. What's some good music? But let's turn on the 5th Astral Era music, because we're going to be talking a bit about that today. Need to move some stuff around. Give me one quick second. Close my window. How y'all doing? Y'all excited for the, we got some more announcements on the, Monster Hunter Wilds events. We know that there is a normal and an EX, like we thought. There is a, there's normal EX like we thought. There's a, we're getting armor. We're getting the Hope set, and then we're getting the Archvald Guardian weapons. I hope we get the Hope set as well. I'm not hopeful, but I'm hoping we get the Hope set as well. Come on. Come on. Yeah, my window does not want to close. There we go. How's audio, by the way, before we get started? And I need to turn on Audacity. If I'm not mistaken, we stopped off last time. I thought we finished the Allegan section. Can someone give me a confirmation on that? I hope everything... That's very good. So glad to have you. I hope you're doing well, too. Oh, actually, I already have Audacity up. Actually, is this... No, this is... Files. Open. E1 part 2. Open. Created dozens of copies of each. I was excited about, and also in the rung right below Cloud of Amdapor, like Amdapor. Neighbor. To subjugate neighboring city-states. Wary of their neighbors' ambitions, the Amdapori sought to counter these black magics by improving upon their own spellcraft. Weaving with the intent. Cities built upon foundations of magic were forced to sacrifice their natural surroundings as vast amounts of aether were drawn from the land in order to maintain the city's magnificence. The realm's enlightened. The Battle of Amdapor. Okay, so I read the Battle of Amdapor section. The hopes that their efforts would lead to the preservation of their society. Rocky reefs, leaving nary a home to which Nim's few survivors might return. As most of their land's energies had been exhausted in their efforts to seal Diablos, there was little remaining for Amdapor's white mages to draw. There was little remaining for Amdapor's white mages to draw upon to stay the waters which had already enveloped the territories held by Nim and Mach. The alternatives were a hurried exodus into the highlands of Garabania. Okay, so I did before the deluge reached the ancient city. Either Monday, Tuesday, or Wednesday. We have to get through this and through also the dream session, so it might take 2 sections. Cons. who helps to warn the people of the impending doom and provide salvation to countless scorers in their time of need. Without champions such as these... Okay, yep. Okay, so we got down to the 6th Astral Era, Prosperity and Progress. Cool, cool, cool. Let me start a new one. This is EE1. EE1 Part 3. Okay. And let me tweak this down a little. I might get a little quieter for you guys. Just let me know if you can still hear me. Just because I want fewer mouth sounds, and turning down the gain. Getting closer to the mic will help with that. Okay. Get to do some startups. Okay. They totally broke the chat layout for portrait mode. Oh no! That sucks, V. You mean copious amounts of lasagna and having a generally great time? I mean, Infinite, are you sure you're not Garfield? Having a great morning. It's raining. Oh, that sounds great, Sarah. Desperate. I love rain. Maybe it's a little quiet on low. Do I had to max out my headphones this time? Could also just be the AC and noise on my end. Well, that's interesting. It shouldn't be, because like my gain here. Let me see if I can boost myself in. Test. No, because I'm already at. I don't think I can be boosted anymore, and I don't want to. Problem is, I don't want to boost myself too high for the gain. Just let me know, Deathberry, if it keeps being an issue. Definitely let me know again. It definitely got quieter. Okay. How can I balance this out so that you guys hear me loud enough, but that I'm getting low enough gain? Let me see if I can do a booster on my end. Let me know if this is any better. Here, I'm gonna try a 125% increase. Ooh, okay. This should be better without being a problem. Let me know. In fact, I might even turn it bad. Sorry to do all the audio fixings up beforehand, but there's nothing worse than trying to fix that in post. Wait, but Mondays too? Okay, Infinite, you're definitely just Garfield. So with the luxury of hindsight and some recontextualization, were Amdapor stuffing Sin Eaters into statues or no? No, because Sin Eaters can't exist, as far as we know, for the most part, without a large amount of ambient umbrality. A little bit better. Okay, here. I will boost it even further. At least I now know how to boost. Can you guys definitely pre-warn me if this gets too loud? Let me know if I'm too loud right now. Or if I get too loud at all. No, my tablet's near max volume 2. Okay, so it's not just... It's very interesting. The game would be too... Test. Let me know if this is good. 1, 2, 3. Of all the money that ere I had, I spent it in good company. And of all the harm that ere I've done, alas it was to none but me. So now we know what Infinite is going to be for book club. Now we know what Infinite is going to be for Halloween. We'll notify you once the ears start bleeding. Better. Okay. I'm at 3.5. Talk. Yeah, no, okay. It goes into the... Okay. We'll go with this. Let me know. You guys let me know. Please keep me... I now have a way to change it at post. Or not at post. Change it in OBS without changing it for... Okay. Friendly reminder. This PDF is created using a personal copy of EE1. I have more than one copy of them. These are just a visual aid to be this for this. Please go buy and support the official release of Encyclopedia Eorzea's Volume 1, 2, and 3, hopefully 4 soon. And also, there is, within the Final Fantasy XIV terms of service, they explain whether or not this can be used. And then also, let me read off, just at the beginning, as part of the Square Enix use. Give me a second. I lost my notes this morning, so. There we go. The Final Fantasy XIV material usage license, which is also in the description. Final Fantasy XIV is comprised of materials such as art. Where is it? Trademarked. Square Enix Co. Limited, Square Enix Inc., collectively Square Enix, grants you permission to utilize certain materials as specified below. The materials on a non-commercial basis for the purpose of supporting and developing the Final Fantasy XIV community in accordance to the following terms and condition. Yes, Final Fantasy XIV is a registered trademark of Square Enix Holdings Co. Limited and Square Enix. Cool. That's not just for legal reasons, that's also just because best practices. Okay. Every day is Halloween if you're silly enough. That's true. Is there some music in the background? There is. I'm currently playing 5th Astral Era music. Is it too quiet or too loud? Laffy, good to have you. So now we know what every day, blah, blah, blah. I have 2 and 3. I need to go out and get 1 someday. Big recommend. They're fucking gorgeous books. Lovely, lovely tomes. Okay. Shall we get started then? Right now the music from Amdapor is up. It should be relatively quiet though. Okie dokie. We are now on to the 6th Astral Era. Interesting that it's... Why is it all so quiet for you? I'm trying to think about why it would be all so quiet, but it doesn't matter. Okay, let me know if that's too loud at any point. Or if it overshadows me. No, no, Deathberry, do not feel bad for asking for audio complaints. This is a stream where I'm doing readings and I'm recording it myself. I would rather us take 15 minutes at the start to get all the audio stuff all set up and be good to go, rather than get to the end, find out that it's been crap the whole time. You don't need to. Thank you. I can't know what you guys can hear, so thank you for letting me know. Okay. So, friendly reminder, last time, over the past 2, we had completed the first chapter and we were into chapter 2. We had finished the 5th Astral Era information. Basically, the rising floodwaters, the calamity of water had hit, and now we are going to be into the 6th Astral Era. So this is obviously the Astral Era in which, well, 1.0 takes place, and through a lot of the history that we are dealing with throughout A Realm Reborn take place, as we're only 5 years outside of the 6th Astral Era at the start of A Realm Reborn. So, yeah. Cool. Give me a second to make sure my mic's all good. The 6th Astral Era. Prosperity and progress. Overcoming calamities of each of the 6 basic elements, the people of the 6th Astral Era believed that the worst was behind them, and that the consequent era would foretell everlasting prosperity. We now know this was but a falsehood, and that the 7th period of destruction awaited them. We now know that this was but a false hope, and that the 7th period of destruction awaited them almost 16 centuries hence. This still, however, begs the question. If the 6 basic elements were accounted for, why then did a 7th calamity arise? To find the answer, one must travel back to the dawn of the 6th astral era, where man began his journey anew. The Age of Restoration, years 1 to 400. Scars left by the 6th umbral era ran deep, instilling much despair into the hearts of the realm's few survivors. Fearing that its continued use might further their woes, the art of magic was widely forbidden. Libraries housing ancient tomes were put to flame, while those who practiced, or were rumored to practice, the art of spellcraft were hunted down and tried as criminals. Many a learned man met the same demise, as the masses had become so incensed they could no longer distinguish the difference between science and sorcery. With the majority of their greatest minds lost, the few remaining nations of the 5th astral era crumbled and vanished, their peoples scattering about the realm to lay claim to what little resources remained. Driven by the primal urge to survive, tribes and clans banded together into small communities and began a centuries-long journey to rebuild their broken lives. Footnote: between the destruction wrought by the War of the Magi and that by the Calamity of Water, little remained of the 5th astral era's city-states. Those who survived the chaos abandoned the shells of their once magnificent nations, choosing instead to establish small hamlets. This might be relevant when thinking about what happened to Karnak. Just saying. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, go to the Occult Crescent. Not the books! Not the books! Yeah, no, Deathberry, I feel you on that. It is also always worth remembering that a lot of why technological innovation within the confines of the source is where it's at is because we've had multiple dark ages where all that progress has been reset. That historically, if we look at it, the exponential curve of civilizations that learn advanced forms of magic and or technologies is a pretty rapid one. If we would look at Alag, we look at Mach and Amdapor, who all in all were not around that long. Who, if we look at places like Alexandria, if we look at, Ronka, etc., etc. Excuse me. At least it seems like the Dark Age that was at the beginning of the 6th Astral Era does not seem to be as bad as the Dark Age coming out of Alag, in which everyone was just like, nah, man, burn it all down. The Age of Communion, years 400 to 1000. 400 years removed from the Great Deluge, Eorzea's population finally began to experience a resurgence. Immigrants from islands beyond the Bloodbrine Sea, as well as the eastern continents of Othard and Ilsabard, arrived in Aldenard in droves. 3 great migratory waves of Hyur also inflicted irreversible change on Eorzea's population distribution. Racial tension reached its peak at this time, with individual races seen gravitating to certain city-states to escape persecution. The Elozen to Ishgard in the highlands of Kurthus, the Lalafell to Beladia in the deserts of Thanalin, and the Rogadin to Limsa Laminsa on the Isle of Vilbrand. However, even this was not without its problems. It was only a matter of years before infighting amongst the Lalafellian royalty of Beladia resulted in the nation's fall, and its bifurcation into 2 new city-states, Ul'dah and Sildee. That is not to say, however, that the period was devoid of racial harmony. Their banishment from the Black Shroud by the spirits of the forest worked towards... Okay, this is just weirdly written. That is not to say, however, that the period was devoid of racial harmony. Their banishment from the Black Shroud by the spirits of the forest worked towards strengthening the bonds between Hyur and Elozen living in the Black Shroud, ultimately leading to their joint establishment of the underground city of Galmora. Honestly, I would have probably framed that as Black Shroud, and then the 12s would avoid repetition, but hey, what can you do? Let's go to Gladavia. You know another good indicator of civilization advancement? Culinary culture. Don't tell Charlian that. The ruins of Belladia. Descendants of the Maki mages sought to escape persecution through the founding of Belladia. As a result, the forbidden black magics of their forebears did not die. As a result, the forbidden black magics of their forebears did not die out, and were instead cleverly integrated into their worship of the sun goddess, Azima. So I'm going to have to change, I think. Changing up mic placement to have an easier time reading. Let us see Galmora. Hey, we do get to see Galmora. Well, okay, no, we don't get to go into the entrance of the North Shroud, but we do get to see Isamhar, so there's at least that. No, if we don't get a, if we get a variant dungeon, if we get any more variant dungeons on the, Aldenard, the ones I would expect to see would be, Ugamoro in the north, in Vilbrand, maybe something with the dragons in the Ishgard, in the Dravanian areas. I would expect to see Galmora would be a really easy one, like what we saw with Sildi. Yeah, those are some of the few that come to mind. For example, gobbies and their cheese making. Garlean has excellent nutritional science, though, rather than food culture. Yeah. Theirs is a culture of blandness, just like the English. Ray Ray's gone, right? Ray Ray's not in chat. Footnote. Ishgard. Ishgardian scripture teaches the King Thordan answered the call of Halone to lead his people to the promised land in Kurthis, 1,000 years past, which would place the area's settlement around the latter half of the 6th century. This, however, has since been proved by historians to be erroneous. As newly unearthed evidence dates the Elazan's arrival in Kurthis to at least 200 years earlier. The Age of Strife, years 1000 to 1300. For the next several hundred years, the city-states exhibited steady progress as they continued to grow and gain power. When they sought to expand their claim on surrounding lands, however, new complications arose. Territorial feuds betwixt neighbors led to heightened tensions in the Outlands. Indigenous beast tribes such as the kobolds and the Ixal, infuriated with those with whom they perceived as invaders, began to rise in defiance, despoiling the land in protest. Unable to put aside their difference, Ul'dah and Sildi waged a petty war until neither side could remember what it was they fought. This phrase weird. Until neither side could remember why it was they fought at all. As bloody battles broke out across the realm, the balance of power began to shift once more. Rivers ran with blood, while coin flowed from the hands of the ambitious into the pockets of mercenaries and sellswords. Ul'dah emerged as the rulers of Thanalin after finally conquering their sister city-state and reducing it to rubble. The warring tribes of Girabanya were at long last brought together by the Highland Hyur clan and joined to form the city-state of Alamigo. For Alamigo! Advancements in shipbuilding techniques strengthened the Limsan Lominsan's dominion over the seas, while increased dealings with the lands beyond Eorzea transformed the maritime city-state to a wealthy melting pot of cultures. After many long years of developing the art, the people of Galmora finally succeeded in using conjury to achieve communion with the spirits of the Black Shroud, and convinced the elementals to grant them residence in the forest. It is also at this time that the spirits, angered by the violent actions of the Ixal, sent the tribe into exile beyond the Black Shroud's protective barrier. The Hedge. Free to emerge from their underground refuge, rid of troublesome Ixal, the people of Gelmora established a new city-state, Gridania. Sorry, Ray. Speaking of Garlean and food culture. Footnote. Not all residents of Gelmora chose to leave the caves in which the people had resided for centuries, expressing distrust towards the elementals who had driven them underground in the first place. Those few Eorzean who refused to leave the city would in time become known as the Duskwights. The Age of Stability, years 1300 and 1500. Years 1300 to 1500. Weary of fighting, the people of Eorzea sought to mend bonds that had grown torn and frayed over the centuries. Aggressive tactics were abandoned for diplomacy, and intercity state commerce was restored. As technology and culture were shattered, the nations experienced a prosperity unseen since the 5th Astral Era. The city-states of Limsa Lominsa, Gridania, Ul'dah, Ishgard, Alamigo, and Garlean matured, and became the focal point of Eorzean civilization. Peace, for once, finally prevailed in the land. However, the opening of these doors eventually led to the closing of others. Fearing their livelihood would be lost or altered by the influx of new people and ideas, independent craftsmen and warriors alike began banding together to preserve their trades. They formed guilds, not only to safeguard their knowledge, but to provide themselves with the wherewithal to form business partnerships, which would help assure their financial stability. Unfortunately, where man treads, peace is never long to last. In an attempt to expand their influence in the Black Shroud, Alamigo exploited the realm's illusion of security by launching a series of large-scale campaigns into Tenolqua, which would eventually lead to the onset of the Autumn War. Visitor Thomas, good to see you, glad to have you. I feel bad that Duskwights and Gridania just didn't get an arc. I mean, it depends on what you mean by just didn't get an arc. So if we think about the degree to which Uldah's built into things in like 2.55, you got something there. If you want to talk about the way they're not built in having like what 5.4 has with Limsa, sure. But we go to the Seedseer Council a lot and also have major things involved with Gridania. Now, I know everyone gets this with the role quests, but I think, for instance, their role quest is deeply tied into, because it's tied into the Seedseers specifically. We get that when it comes to the tanking role quests. I think their job, of them, other than maybe Paladin with Ul'dah. Well, I mean, I guess you could say Dark Knight with Ishgard, but I would definitely say White Mage ties a lot into it. I see what you're saying with the MSQ, but I would just point to how often we're going to the Seedseer Council, which I think sometimes people forget. Or, for instance, for the way they help with the Mughals, or the way we go to them, not only just commune with the Elementals, but get their help with Y'shtola, or when it's the meeting place for dignitaries, like when we're dealing with Portional. So, do they get one as strong as Nanamo's story or as strong as 5.4 Merlib? Nah, but I wouldn't say that there's no story, that they don't. I would say that collectively there's a very strong story told there. Not all of it may necessarily be directly through the MSQ. Like, it felt the whole Gridanian discrimination against Duskwights and Keeper of the Moon AR didn't go anywhere. I mean, that's mainly because I don't think it's supposed to go somewhere as much as it's supposed to be talking about discrimination. Like, in terms of, and this is a good conversation, and honestly, this is a good place to pause for a second. You're not the first person to say that, so I don't think you're alone by any means. But I point out that, like, within the confines of the Archer quest line, right, that discrimination is dealt with, right? Like, the point is like the discrimination against the bullshit of the discrimination against the Keepers of the Moon. And also how how the poachers, for instance, also bring some of that upon themselves, but people like, I am forgetting her name, but the female member of the Keepers of the Moon that you deal with throughout the Archer, how she's trying to break down the Wildwood and his prejudice. So I feel like that's contained within that story. So all it does is address that there is that prejudice, where it comes from, and how it's overcome within that confines. When we talk about the prejudice towards Duskwhite in somewhere like the Lancer questline, they do a similar thing, right? Where it kind of addresses that. Now, that one has a sadder ending, where I'm forgetting his name, ends up dying. Although you can find his corpse in Isamhar in the Palace of the Dead if you're lucky enough. He's one of the random spawns that can show up. But one of the points that's made in that story is that absolutely he suffered prejudice and it's bullshit, like the leader of the Lancer Guild points out. But also that at some point when you start just rampantly saying, nah, I'm best, and start attacking people, you also are held to accountability. Now, I get why people also want more Duskwhite representation, and often one that's maybe less antagonistic. I think part of the genuine problem with Duskwhite, specifically Duskwhite, I'm not saying like dark-colored elves, because technically dark-colored elves and other races, Eldai, exist. But Duskwhite is that they're just such a small population to begin with, which means that you're going to have a very small amount of people to interact with, and of those people, very, very, very few of them are going to exist in Gridania. So it's a little bit of an awkward thing to even engage with. My hope is that if we ever get a variant dungeon, there's still plenty to engage with within the world. I don't know that I would say it goes nowhere. I would love for them to expound upon it more, but I don't think it goes nowhere. I don't know. Let me know what you think, Inquisitor. The Archer questline taught me no good deed goes unpunished. Some of that's true. Okay. Good combo. Footnote. The Sharlians who traverse south and east into the northern wastes to settle in Eorzea brought with them a wealth of knowledge long lost. Seeking to resurrect the wisdom of the ancients and re-enlighten the dark realm, the scholars were tireless in their efforts. For example, it was through their intervention that Eorzeans were once again able to harness the teleportative properties of aetherites, the construction of the aetherite being part of the construction of the aethernet being part of this legacy. I want to point out that the ancients there is not referring to the ancients, but the ancients is an old people. Yeah, the only major Duskwhite character I think we really interact with is Shale. And she's from the 9th and thus isn't a Duskwhite. And on the one Duskwhite with Gaius and the Shadowhunter arc. Yeah. Although it's interesting he lives above ground he lived above ground in the forest. But there are, it also depends on what you mean by major, right? Because there are plenty of other like Duskwhite characters that you can talk to in side quests and elsewhere. Or there's plenty of Duskwhite Eldite. They're not Duskwhite, but Eldite, darkskin Eldite that are in side quests. Like they're represented, but you know, for a lot of people, I think that barely counts. I would argue that it should count more, but okay. The Rise of Garlemald, years 1500 to 1560. I'm gonna change up the music real quick. A good song. Oh, you know what? I'm gonna play since we're talking about Garlemald. A long. I love this song so much. It kind of reminds me of Final Fantasy X, and also it's got a really fun hidden thing inside of it. Let's take that from the top. The Rise of Garlemald, years 1500 to 1560. For context, the 6th Astral Era ends in the year 1572. 1577 would effectively be where A Realm Reborn begins. What little magics the Gridanians perfected in the generations since their departure from Gelmora were no match for the sheer martial might of the Alamegan forces, and it appeared that the Sylvan city-state would quickly fall to her invaders. However, in a move most unexpected, the city-states of Ishgard, Ul'dah, and Limsa Lominsa dispatched their armies to Gridania's aid, and just as quickly as the Autumn War began, so too was it resolved. Orders were set and treaties signed. City-states would remain independent, but the rise of one would not be tolerated, and thus peace once again settled over the realm. Outside Aldenard, the flames of conquest began to rise. To the north of the continent of Ilsabard, the Republic of Garlemald was overwhelming nearby nations with their iron war machina, seizing their land and consuming their cultures. In the year 1552, the leader of the Republic... I'm going to note that I'm going to need to make a note here. There's actually an error, I believe, in this section, if I'm not mistaken. In the year 1552, the leader of the Republic, Solus Galvus, declared Garlemald an empire and appointed himself emperor. The new imperial army, now swelling with the might of countless assimilated nations, methodically subjugated the eastern continent of Othard and the remaining lands of Ilsabard, welcoming those nations willing to bow to imperial rule, while erasing those which refused the Garlean standard. With 2 of the 3 great continents now under its control, the Garlean Empire set its sights on Aldenard, and in the year 1557 sent the 14th Legion to conquer Alamigo, in the first steps to bring Eorzea's people under the imperial rule. Okay, there's a footnote I need to give here, because this says 1552 is when he conquered the East, but we know that that actually happened at a different time. Give me a second. I'm gonna need to make a custom footnote here. There you go. I know I'm pretty sure it's early. I'm not crazy, it's real. Nope, 1557. Yeah, it's that's not the right year. Rambo, good to glad to have you. And welcome back out there. Sorry to interject, but have there ever... Yeah, you're good, AC. Have there ever been any records of Solus' battle history or campaigns? I hear how good of a leader he is, but never his battle on the front lines. He's a knightly Garlean soldier in his days as a legatus. I would just to say, like, look at Varys and use that as a kind of allegory. I mean, being Emmett, he's obviously way stronger. The 2 things I would look to if you want specific examples of his strength, well, the first thing is look to the Reaper quest line. Specifically, we know he was attempted to assassinated and it just didn't work, because I mean you're not gonna get Emmett that way. I know there's an early section that talks about... Oh, I'm not. There is a section in EE2 that like specifically documents the aha, here we go. No lands must remain in the yeah, okay. Single post as well as smaller units, which help me. Yeah, because 1547 is when they take over Dalmasca, which obviously that's 10 years prior, or not 10 years, sorry, 5 years prior. So what year does following the victory, Empire divided and conquered the kingdoms of Dalmasca, Lord Kine invasion was dispatched the It should be 25 years ago. So that should be, we're at 1577. Theory should be 1552 is when this takes. So 1552 would be. Let me recheck that. The earlier there to Garlean Empire appointed himself emperor. The new. Yeah, so this says that they attacked Dalmasca in 1547, but this says they didn't attack the other lands until 1550. So, I'm gonna create like a little. Elio. However, those 26 I knew. However, they would not hit. Let me reread that line again. In the year 15, the leader of the Republic was declared. That. Let me look at the timeline. I think that's erroneous on a couple fronts because the Garlemald should have been formed before that as an empire. Because we know it was attacking the nations before that. Yeah, the Imperial Legions of Garlemald launched a military campaign to the Eastern Continent in 1528. So, that's already going down. Yeah, okay, yeah. So even in EE1, even just like 20 pages later, this section's incorrect. Let me, okay, I'm gonna need a large footnote, so this is gonna take me a second. Give me a moment. Actually, quite a bit wrong with this. Okay. East of taking. How much of a nerd am I that I like know that just offhand? Two. However, (1528 to 15). Yeah, thanks, Bramble. I think this is probably a localization mess up, where that was supposed to be referring to the end of the campaign. The Eastern campaign starts in 28. That's what Bramble was saying. 22 is, yeah. Eight. And Doma was 25 years ago. So in theory, Doma should be 1552. Let me double check that. Can I get a price check on Isle lore? Can someone double check my work and tell me make sure that 1552, because it's supposed to be right before Hien was born. He's 25. And I know it's more than 20 years because it was before Alamigo fell. A nerd in my lore channel? Yeah, right. Okay, I'm gonna go with that. If someone wants to catch me on that, they can sue me. Okay. Let me check that my footnote's correct. Are they a footnote? This book just... I should describe the formation of the Empire, conquering of the East have taken place in the year 1522. However, the Republic was made an empire in the year 1522, and the Eastern Campaign begins 1528 with Dalmasca. Contacted my lawyers right away. Yeah. And thanks, Bramble, for the check on the 1528, 1550. To book and page. There are not a lot of errors in this book, but I just remember this is one of them. Okay. I'm gonna be right back. I'm gonna get water and I'm gonna use that silence to know to edit in the future. Okay. Let me change the music. Elio, footnote. This passage describes the formation of the Empire and conquering of the East to have taken place in the year 1552. However, the Republic was made an empire in the year 1522, and the Eastern Campaign began in the year 1528, with Dalmasca falling in 1547 and Doma in 1552. As listed on pages 51 and 52 of this book, and page 62 of Encyclopedia Eorzea, Volume 2. Footnote. This early Magitech armor prototype was developed by the Republic of Garlemald. Incapable of flight, its movements could best be described as insect-like, yet the Machina's fully independent mobility made it a formidable weapon in the Imperial arsenal. To their credit, EE1 is outdated from So, okay, well, okay. There's yes but no. So there's a very big difference between the information in here that is labeled as in universe, which is almost all the universe, and because of that is not necessarily erroneous, but recontextualized in some way. For instance, our knowledge of the Void Scent. This is just a flat out error. So this is not there's no implication that the people writing this are going to make mistakes. That's not. What it is that knowledge of what is understood at the time. But this is not what's understood at the time. Literally 20 pages later, it says it says differently. So in that case, Dallas, it's not, literally, it's not even a different book corrects this. It's just an error. I'm glad you didn't trip over text as much as I do. I see a word and pronounce it 15 different ways. Yeah, you'll definitely have to catch me on it if I do any of that. The root of consequence. Subsequent generations of historians will ever argue which underlying event was the true catalyst that brought about the Seventh Umbral Calamity. However, it would be remiss to form an opinion without first observing those events which transpired in the autumn of the Sixth Astral Era, culminating in the fateful battle on the plains of Cartno. So this is basically all going to be 1.0 lore stuff from here. So if you don't know 1.0 stuff pretty very well, make sure to listen to what I have to say, what we have to say here. The Battle of The Battle of Silvertear Skies. The fall of Alamigo did quick work in spurring the remaining free populations of Eorzea to action. The four city-states, Limsa, Ul'dah, and Gridania. Limsa, Ul'dah, Gridania, and Ishgard formed an alliance in the year 1561 to deter the Garlean Empire's advances into the region. The Sharlians, however, did not join the pact. The scholars' abhorrence of war compelled them to dispatch a special envoy to Garlemald shortly after Alamigo's surrender, for the sole purpose of diplomatic proceedings. These efforts were in vain, as the Garleans refused to meet the envoy at the negotiation table. Failing to reach a political solution, Orm decreed that the scholars would abandon the colony in the Dravanian hinterlands altogether, and returned to their homeland across the northern wastes. Once Alamigo had been fully assimilated into the Empire, both politically and economically, the 14th Imperial Legion focused on hastening the progress of the Eorzean campaign. In 1562, the Imperial fleet, accompanied by the mighty flagship the Agrius, forged its way into Mordona, to Silvertear Falls. It was there that the Legion's armada encountered an unexpected resistance, yet not at the hands of man, but of the worm, Midgardsormr. Forgotten guardian deity of the lake. The great dragon called out to his kin, who pitted themselves against the Garlean fleet in an aerial battle of epic proportions. The battle ended when Midgardsormr and the Agrius collided and plummeted to the land, compelling the Legion into a swift and complete retreat from Mordona. Not long after Midgardsormr's demise, something unexplained occurred. Eorzean beast tribes began summoning their own gods, the primals, into the corporeal realm. Dubbed archons by the Garleans, who questioned their divine origins. These powerful creatures were deemed a threat to imperial rule, and soon made a target of its armies. The 14th Legion legatus Gaius van Baelsar quickly observed the futility of engaging the archons in battle, as the vanquished gods were brought back time and time again, through the use of crystals and prayer. Moreover, there were increasing reports that the blessings of these primal beings were transforming men into fanatics, who would turn on their own kind in the name of their new rulers. Without a proper military strategy to address the archon threat, Emperor Solus Zosgalvis would eventually order Baelsar to suspend the Eorzean campaign. It was also at this time that after 5 years of preparation, the Sharlians would embark on their exodus from the Dravanian hinterlands, back to Old Sharlian. In the span of a single night, an entire population vanished from the realm, leaving the remaining Eorzeans to tackle the myriad problems that still faced Eorzea. Footnote: the flagship Agrius under attack by the horde led by Midgardsormr, the father of all dragons. The hollow corpse of the great worm remains in Silvertear Lake, perpetually entwined with the wreckage of the Garlean war vessel. Midgard Somer 1, Garlean 0. Are we going to see the art of Solace twinkle? What? You're gonna have to explain that one to me, Inquisitor. Should be noted that this scene is actually a cutscene. Yeah, the scene of Midgard Somer and the Agrius fighting over Silvertear skies is the 1.0 trailer. You can go watch it right now. The Age of Calm. Actually, I'm going to change the music. Let's see. What are we going to change? Someone give me a town music from 14. Give me your favorite town music. Yeah, but okay. The reason I didn't think that that's what they could mean, Laffy, is because I would in no way describe Old Man Solace as Twink Solace, but hey, what do I know? That's not... You've completely... I don't know if I've just gotten old, Inquisitor, but the way you were describing Old Solace, I have no idea what you mean. That's not Twink Death. Death is too soft a word for that. You keep saying that. You keep saying, no, I'm describing Solace Twink. You keep saying that like I'm supposed to understand what the frick that's supposed to mean. Imagine how long it took to build the Agrius the first time. I mean, hopefully you'd think it'd be easier the second times. I forgot to scroll the pages as we're going. This is what I just read. Pain. Oh, I never. Pain and pleasure. Okay, Yulmore it is. You've been on a Yulmore tear lately, Infinite. The Age of Calm. The Holy See of Ishgard withdrew from the Eorzean alliance in 1563. Unwilling to divert military power, used fighting the 1,000-year Dragonsong War to efforts against the now idle Garlean Empire. Citing the Emperor's suspension of their Eorzean campaign following the Battle of Silvertear Skies. With the invasion halted, Imperial forces stationed in Alamigo instead began construction of Baelsar's Wall between the newly annexed Garabanian territories and Gridania. Despite not knowing whether the wall was to serve as a means for the Empire to secretly prepare for a second invasion, or rather to simply quarantine a realm deemed plagued by false, yet deadly beastmen gods, the Holy See concluded that the Garlean armies would not be mobilizing their forces anytime soon, and that the city-state's manpower would be better suited defending Ishgard against the recent rise of Nidhogg. Foreshadowing is a narrative. What relation does the name of the shop have to do with Agrius from... I would check to make sure they're even necessarily the same in Japanese. AC, I mean, it may not have anything. It may just be a use of that title. I would also check to see that if the Agrius as a title is used elsewhere. Or also we know that people who worked on early 14 and still to this day are big Tactics fans. So. Foreshadow brick. With the cessation of Garlemald's expansion, Eorzea entered a brief period of respite from the hostilities that had plagued the region for so long. Without an enemy to engage, the Eorzean alliance lasted but in name, as its armies were dissolved and its resources reallocated. While the threat of incursion had subsided, countless scores of infantry who had, until recently, lived, ate, and breathed war were left without work and without a cause. It was amidst this uncertainty that the Adventurers Guild was formed, providing steady employment for displaced soldiers. The guilds not only helped these men and women reintegrate into society, but also provided the common folk with the means to complete tasks which had become too dangerous since the Imperial invasion and the rise of the Beast Tribes. The Age of Adventure was upon Eorzea. Footnote. Adventurers Guild branches quickly sprung up in all Eorzean city-states, most often in or alongside places frequented by men and women looking for work, such as taverns or inns. These establishments transformed into more than simple places to wet one's throat or rest one's head. With the establishment of the guilds, they were transformed into the bustling centers of exchange, where adventurers could share information while undertaking any number of tasks, from securing delivery routes through perilous territory to the culling of beasts raiding farmers' livestock. If the Sylph attacked the wall with Ramu, wouldn't they all be able to just float over the wall? Yeah, but why would they care to get into Girabanya? You know? Like, could they have just floated over it? Absolutely, Laffy. Well, I say absolutely. There's a good chance that they would have been shot down. So, keep that in mind. But secondly, why would they want to? You know? Looking at Ramu's trial right now, and he's floating above the ground. Also, friendly reminder, hovering is not flying. Just because he can hover doesn't mean he can fly. Just saying. Magitech anti-aircraft weaponry, so flying is a no-go. I mean, honestly, I'm with Dallas on this one. The idea of Garlean being invaded by sylphs just flying over the wall is a hilarious mental image. The Sylph Empire. I mean, look, the touched ones, if the touched ones weren't so insular, they might be about that life. The Circle of Knowing. In the year 1562, the venerable Louis-Soix Levior quietly gathered 12 of his pupils, the Garlean motherland, for an ambitious undertaking. They formed the Circle of Knowing, a group of esteemed researchers and scholars known as archons, dedicated to a single mission, the salvation of Eorzea. Weary of war and displeased with the Forum's unwillingness to intervene, the Circle vowed to take matters into their own hands through more clandestine means. Louis-Soix knew that in order to dissuade the threat of a Garlean invasion, the Eorzean alliance would eventually have to bare its teeth. The sage dispatched his fellow archons to the 3 city-states, hoping they would be able to convince each of the representative leaders to re-establish the Grand Company. Consolidated centers of command, which would combine military, economic, and technological resources to prepare for forthcoming disaster. While a new concept to many in the 6th Astral Era, this was not the first time entities of this nature had been introduced to Eorzea. 1500 years prior, as the sun threatened to set on the 5th Astral Era, these city-states called upon these selfsame organizations to see to the evacuation of a realm beset with the rising waters of calamity. Though reluctant at first, the leaders of the 6th Astral Era were wise enough to see the benefits an alliance built upon the foundation of Grand Company would provide their city-states, and thus they cast bitter quarrels aside for the betterment of their realm. The Circle for the better of their realm. The Circle of Knowing's efforts had not been in vain, and over the course of the next several years, they would ultimately play a significant role in the shaping of Eorzea's history. When did the Sylphs cross Baelsar's wall to get to, why did the Sylphs to get to the others? Very good, Laffy, very good. I'm trying to think, okay, how many of the people do we know from the Circle of Knowing? Because it's Y'shtola, Urianger, Thancred, Moonbrita, Papalimo. I know we know more than that. Will we ever know why even men of learning like the great Louis Swag grovel? You know, when I watch videos by or talk to people who play WoW for a living, and they tell me, you know, 14 is a bunch of story lovers and gooners and memers, and I try to defend y'all, you make my life very hard. Yida, yep, good call. Rogan and Guy from St. Koinek. Is Rambros? Okay, so Rambros and Yida. Yeah, Yida's a good call. Yeah, Rambros. Okay, Rambros is. So, Rambros, Yida, Moonbrita, Y'shtola, Urianger, Thancred. I'm fairly certain there's like 2 examples of ones that I don't think it's Moonbrita's parents, but I know there's like some examples of some ones that like you wouldn't think of. You guys are definitely right about Rambos though, because I always forget about Rambos and you always remind it. The primal threat. It took time, however, for the city-states to warm to the Circle of Knowing's plan for unity. The realm had lost a common enemy, and the Imperial Legion retreated back behind Baelsar's wall, lessening the necessity of an all-encompassing alliance. City-states instead turned their focus inward, territorial disputes with the local beast tribes, disputes which had increased in frequency and severity since the Battle of Silvertear Skies. The need to quickly and efficiently deal with the beastmen was reinforced by the fact that the tribes had begun summoning ethereal entities considered by the tribes to be the deities from which their forebears claimed descent. These beings were widely known as primals, or the first beings. A particularly alarming incident involving a primal arose in 1564, when Amalja from the plains of Pagathon summoned their god, Ifrit, in an effort to reclaim Zanarok, ancestral lands sacred to the tribe. As their god wreaked havoc in southern Thanalin, laying waste to a mithril excavation site operated by the Amagina and Sons mineral concerns, the tribe's army marched on outposts garrisoned by Ul'dah, overwhelming the unprepared soldiers and reclaiming the land as their own. This was, however, not an isolated incident. The Kobold and Sahagin tribes of Vilbrin had also been granted the secrets of summoning primals, and began doing so with increased frequency. Though much of the realm cowered at the beastmen's newfound might, there were those who refused to be intimidated, and instead welcomed the opportunity for fame. It was during this tumultuous time that a death or glory band of braggadocious known as the Company of Heroes, made a name for itself hunting down the self-proclaimed gods who plagued Limsa Lominsa. These acts of bravery, however, had little, if any, effect on the balance of power within the realm. If anything, Eorzea's adventurers found themselves trapped in a vicious cycle, slaying one primal, only to see another rise again, just as powerful as before. It was the Circle of Knowing that first observed the environmental decay being caused by the repeated summoning of primals. The ceremonies required massive quantities of aether-based crystals required for the land to maintain elemental balance. The Circle, hitherto focused on saving the realm from Garlean invaders, were quick to realize that there would be no realm to save. The beast tribes first bled the land dry of its aether. To tackle this new threat, the archons enlisted the talents of the Students of Baldessian, a fellow Sharlayan organization dedicated to the pursuit of knowledge, to search for clues as to how the beast tribes inherited such knowledge. After moons of poring over dusty tomes and forgotten archives, the scholars discovered evidence connecting primal summonings to an enigmatic band of purportedly shadowless entities known as the Ascians. Further study would be required to determine motive and the degree to which the Ascians were involved, but time was not on the realm's side. Despite a lack of evidence, the Circle approached the esteemed leaders of Eorzea city-states and informed them of the albeit incomplete results of their research. Much to the Circle's surprise, the reports were taken anything but lightly. The city-states recognized the gravity of the situation, and all agreed to act immediately on the information provided them. The Circle of Knowing had proved itself an indispensable source of knowledge, cementing itself as a centerpiece in the now realm-wide effort to neutralize the primal threat. Well, you know what's a good song I can put on loop? Because it's like 7 minutes long. There we go. Icons everywhere. Did you mention Arianje? I did, yeah. Is he still his sister Ymitra? I don't know. I don't think so. But we are literally that. How can we even deny that if that's literally us? That is the truth I cannot deny. Okay. I forgot I did the Company of Heroes have the Blessing of Light. No, most of them don't have the Blessing of Light. Literally, part of the Company of Heroes strategy was effectively just to throw bodies at shit. Yeah. None of them had the Blessing of Light or the Echo, as far as we know. I don't think smart people are called squares, Dallas. I think people are called squares when they're boring and plain. Footnote. A 1564 report by the Mithril Eye on the incident at the Amagina & Sons Mithril Pit T3, wherein the site was attacked by a colossal fire-breathing beast. This broadsheet is the first summoning of the primal Ifrit recorded. Now, I'll have to find some footage of that in-game to use for the video. It's gonna be fun to make the video for this. It's gonna take forever, but to like have like in-game footage for all the relevant. No, that's fair. That's fair, Dallas. That most of the forum is squares. That's for sure. Revival of the Grand Companies. The temporary respite from the Garlean hostility. The temporary respite from the The temporary respite from the Garlean hostilities appeared to be nearing its end by the year 1570, when the airship battalions of the 14th Legion moved to occupy the airspace above Baelsar's wall. Commercial flights in the area were cancelled indefinitely, as civilian airships operated by Highwind Skyways were fired upon without distinction. Travel and trade in the region were severely disrupted, as merchants were forced to abandon the convenience of air routes for more time-consuming and dangerous land routes. This occupation of airspace, while concerning, did not appear to be a full-scale resumption of Garlemald's foray into the realm. That step was not taken until 2 years later, when Nael van Darnis, legatus of the 7th Imperial Legion, marched his men into Alamigo, joining Gaius van Baelsar's 14th Legion, joining Gaius van Baelsar's 14th Battalion, and effectively doubling the Imperial presence in the realm. Darnis's presence in the region confirmed the Eorzean leaders' fears, and provided them more than enough cause to embrace the Circle of Knowing's plan to re-establish the Grand Company. Their purpose set, the city-state moved swiftly to pass laws granting power to the newly formed Maelstrom of Limsa Lominsa, the immortal flames of Ul'dah, and the Order of Twin Adders in Gridania. The Order of the Twin Adder in Gridania. It's worth pointing out that literally, like, right, basically starting with this is all the last patch, like, 2 patches. Okay, depends on what you, like, this is, like, the last 2 content patches of 1.0 is, like, everything that happens from here on. Like, none of almost any, basically, once Louisoix enters the picture, that is all of them doing just some trying to do some setup for Dalamud falling and going into 2.0. Because none of that's in the base game. Someone correct me if I'm wrong, but I am fairly sure, like, base game, there is no Louisoix at all. The city-states held August ceremonies to celebrate the rise of the grand companies, hoping that the revelry would enkindle the spirits of the masses, compelling them to enlist. The events sponsored by the ruling elite were majestic affairs, in which fiery-eyed battle marshals and generals would deliver passionate speeches to enrapture audience in streets bright with the colors of the state. Full aware of their prowess in defending the realm, company officials appealed directly to adventurers, encouraging them to lend their arms to a cause most worthy and one most profitable. Divisions specially tailored to these skilled combatants were established by all 3 grand companies: the Maelstrom, the Immortal Flames, and the Order of the Twin Adder, each vying to lure the most formidable join their ranks. Pagothon mentioned, yeah, I forgot, did any of the company of here Elio, I don't think it's a good time to practice singing. Y'all spend too much time online, because I have no idea what you guys are talking about sometimes. I'm getting old. Rise of the White Raven. A sense of foreboding accompanied Nael van Darnis when the White Raven arrived in the Western Theater with his 7th Imperial Legion. The legatus had been groomed for the military since childhood, his father a decorated war hero in the battle that saw Garlemald become an empire, and was appointed to his esteemed rank shortly after the elder Van Darnis succumbed to a sudden illness. The young legatus was, however, quick to make it clear he would not linger long in the shadow of his predecessor. His first order as legatus being the public execution of his father's close advisors. This brash act provided the legatus with a considerable amount of ill-gained notoriety within the Garlean capital, leading to rumors that Van Darnis, the younger, had contributed to his father's all-too-timely demise. However, Nael's social status and military rank essentially ensured he would never be tried in any court. Bound by fear, the 7th Legion grew into a force unequaled on the battlefield, and under the White Raven's leadership, nations within the eastern continent of Othard fell, one after another. The legatus had amassed scores of crucial victories in the Empire's eastern campaign, enough, in fact, to draw the eye of Emperor Solus Osgalvis himself, who went on to publicly recognize Van Darnis as a man of exceptional talent. The Emperor was well past his 80th name day by the year 1572, but old age would not dull his ambitions to unify the 3 great continents under Garlean rule. After amalgamating the political affairs of the occupied territories in Othard, he set his sights once again upon Aldenard and her vexing Icons. When the Emperor declared the annihilation of the Icons as one of his administrative top priorities, Van Darnis was swift to seize upon the opportunity. He approached his liege and was with a proposal for ridding Eorzea of its false gods once and for all, using House Darnis's closely guarded knowledge of Allagan relics to succeed where others had failed. And so, the wheels of fate began to turn, leading Eorzea towards the events that would eventually culminate in 7th Umbral Calamity. Footnote. It is widely believed Legatus Nael van Darnis earned the epithet White Raven from the sheen of his polished plate mail. But those who served under the Mad Commander claim it came from the ominous eye with which he watched his subordinates. Despite his rank affording him a position in the relative safe rearguard, Van Darnis preferred to join the advanced ranks and fight at the fore with his gun halberd. Bradamante. Damn, good to see you, glad to have you. That tongue twister sounds like the opening of Apt, which is a K-pop song. Okay, thanks, Dallas. You spend too much time on the online fork found in the kitchen. Well, good to see you, glad to have you. Doing good, doing good. Hope you're doing good. The Meteor Project Revisited. The Meteor Project Revisited. The Meteor Project Revisited. In the 41st year of the Okay, so this should be what? Probably 15. This should be 1562 is roughly this year. For those of you who've done Bosnia, make sure to listen up to this next part. The Meteor Project Revisited. In the 41st year of the First Emperor's rule, a decade before Nael van Darnis' arrival on the Western Front, the Garleans attempted communication with the Lesser Moon, Dalamud, under the guidance of the Emperor's principal engineer and Grand Minister of Industry, Metis non Garland. Let me try that again. In the 41st year of the First Emperor's rule, a decade before Nael van Darnis' arrival on the Western Front, the Garleans attempted communication with the Lesser Moon Dalamud under the guidance of the Emperor's principal engineer and Grand Minister of Industry, Metis non Garland. Dubbed Project Meteor, the operation's single test was conducted in the Imperial stronghold of the Bosnia Citadel, using elegant artifacts donated by House Darnis. The project was proposed by non Garland after Emperor Solus Zosgalvis had tasked the engineer with finding a solution to the Icon threat. From records recovered within the artifacts, the Grand Minister was able to glean that the armies of Alag had also exchanged blows with the Icon, eventually conceiving a method to overcome the beings. Detailed descriptions of that method, however, were conveniently missing from the records. A piece to the puzzle presented itself when Garland's research uncovered that the Lesser Moon Dalamud was not a natural celestial body gifted by the gods, but rather an ancient satellite of Allagan manufacture. Non-Garland surmised that within the moon's metallic nacelle slumbered a great source of untapped energy, forgotten power which could transform the moon into a weapon of absolute destruction if pulled down from the skies and unleashed upon Eorzea. The moon would serve as the Empire's own meteor. The Meteor Project was soon drafted, and the tantalizing prospect of an all-powerful weapon was met with broad approval within the Imperial Court. Mere days after receiving the Emperor's blessing, non-Garland would travel to the Garlean city of Bosnia to conduct the first attempt to communicate with Dalamud. The immensity of the satellite's power was indeed confirmed that day, but at a disastrous cost. Nearly 5 millennia's worth of amassed energy was directed by the moon to the Citadel's makeshift transmission tower. The beam emitted by Dalamud was so intense that not only the tower, but the entire city was evaporated in an instant. Efforts were made by the Imperial censors to hide the event from public scrutiny, but the vanishing of a major commercial center was too big a secret to suppress. News of the catastrophe quickly spread across Hydaelyn, later became known as the Bosnian Incident. The loss of Metis non Garland, the lunar transmitter, and the entirety of the Allagan records stored at the Bosnia Citadel seemingly sealed the fate of the Meteor Project. The Emperor declared he had no interest in a power of such unpredictable nature and ordered that the project be dismantled immediately. Nael van Darnis, however, was not yet ready to abandon his obsession with the Meteor Project, refusing to allow the efforts of House Darnis to be left for naught. After learning of his deployment to Eorzea, van Darnis knew his wait was over and seized upon the opportunity to appeal to the Emperor regarding the merits of resurrecting the project, claiming he had discovered a means by which to successfully control Bahamut. After enduring a decade-long stalemate on the Eorzean front, the aged Emperor impatiently solidified his legacy before his death. The aged Emperor, impatient to solidify his legacy before his death, had once again become willing to entertain the notion of a realm-wide cleansing of the Beastmen and their icon. Thus, the second phase of the Meteor Project was commenced. Footnote: Bahamut has long had a place in Eorzean mythos. Before its fall, the Lesser Moon was widely believed to be the loyal hound of the goddess Menfina, and as such, appeared in many religious works of art. Needless to say, discovery of the moon's true origins forced many of the realm's more devout denizens to question their faith. Footnote: Solus Galvus made a name for himself as a decorated legatus in the Garlean Republic, gaining popularity by proposing the integration of magitech, previously only used in industry, into Garlemald's army, and using it to subjugate Ilsebard's northern provinces. He had seen but 33 summers when he overthrew the Republic's ruling party and crowned himself emperor in a bid to institute the imperial regime. His reign would continue for more than 50 years, until his death the first year of the 7th era. Is that correct? Was his death in the first year of the 7th Umbral Era? Or I thought it would... Didn't he die in the first year of the 7th Astral Era? Is Solus dead at the start of A Realm Reborn? Am I going crazy? I remember his death being more of a thing. Because we get that cutscene. He'd been interred and laid at rest for a while? Did I get a price check on Isle lore on this one? Can someone double check me on the year that Solus Galvus died? Because I want to note to Elio, check that the year that Solus Galvus died would have been 1573 and not 1577. If someone else is editing this, make sure to check with Elio or to check yourself. The succession crisis was part of A Realm Reborn. Yeah, okay. That's what I thought, Tam. Here, you know what? What I could do is I can just... If I check in here... Let's come in. I remember if we hear about his death or Varys' victory. Maybe that's what I'm thinking about. Maybe I'm thinking about the end of the Succession War, Sarah, and that's why I'm mistaking it. I just thought I remembered his tomb being in there during... But that would make sense that we're seeing Varys and... is it Van Hydrus? We're seeing... I guess I should pull up that cutscene. I know what you're talking... Yeah. Give me a second. You know what else I can do? We'll keep looking into that in a second. Let me also change the music. Oh, it's not. I was gonna put it on Starless Skyline, but it looks like it's not on yet. Put that on for a second. Give me one quick sec. Okay. If anybody wants to go check that cutscene for me, I'd appreciate it. Get back to reading. I'm gonna put some non-Final Fantasy music. So. Back to reading. A three-sided struggle. With the second phase of the Meteor Project underway, Nael van Darnis proceeded to stockpile the energy that would eventually be required to facilitate Dalamud's fall. The legatus asserted that for Meteor to succeed, the Empire would need to both acquire massive quantities of crystal, as well as secure areas found to exhibit high concentrations of aether. As the Lesser Moon turned deep crimson, 7th Imperial Legion deployed Magitech-equipped squadrons throughout Eorzea to harvest crystal node. While still others were tasked with seizing the Black Shrouds. Hodorok and the Zmail Darkhold in Kurthis, the Imperial garrison also worked to excavate the remnants of Allegan technology left behind in Eorzea, actively seeking any records which could prove useful to Nael's engineers. Okay, the music works great for book club. It does not work great apparently while I'm reading. I need something super fucking chill. Put on Starless Skylines. I'll do it from YouTube. The Garleans more or less get written out of Toto Rock. I'd have to redo the new one. It's been so long. It's been a while since I've done it, since they got changed up. But obviously the like Garlean nodule things got taken out of it. But it doesn't really change much for that to be changed, to be frank. But yeah, I know the node stuff I think mostly got taken out. The Grand Companies, though wholly unaware of the 7th Imperial Legion's motives for the most recent incursion, sounded the alarms. Adventurers comprising the Companions' ranks were dispatched to the Black Shroud in Kurthis, and were successful in not only halting the Imperial operations, but reclaiming the occupied outpost. This handful of victories bolstered confidence in the Grand Company's ability to thwart the Imperial forces, providing light for the realm that found itself plunged into darkness. Yet the Empire was not the only enemy with which Eorzea had to contend. Recognizing an increase in primal activity that appeared to coincide directly with the Empire's invasion, the Archon Louis Sois made the long journey to Eorzea with the intention of convincing the Grand Companies that if they sought victory, the Beast Tribes were not to be ignored. The Circle of Knowing proffered a solution: use the adventurers to launch a two-tiered offensive. This plan, however, was not without its complications. Nael van Darnis himself appeared before adventurers sent to slay Ifrit. Drawing forth his halberd to slice open a vein of aether in the primal's cloister and force an untimely retreat. Soon after, the Mughals of the Black Shroud summoned a manifestation of a fabled murderous regent, while the Ixali called upon the mad Garuda. The Circle of Knowing scrambled to gather intelligence on these primals, and the tribes who had hitherto been unable or unwilling to summon them. Under the Archon's guidance, the adventurers were successful in their endeavors to temporarily quell the Beastmen's wrath. Yet it became clear that these were hollow victories, when it was discovered that the flood of aether which flowed from the primals upon their demise did not return to the land. It was instead being absorbed into Dalamud. The realm, it appeared, could not be stopped from sinking ever deeper into chaos. Footnote: In the days preceding his death, Nael van Darnis was completely consumed by his obsession with Dalamud. His manner became increasingly erratic, and he spoke quixotically of sacrificing his body and soul to the Red Moon. Some post-calamity discourse argues that it is highly likely that his sanity was being compromised by the influence of a primal. Infiltration of Castrum Novum. While the Grand Companies were preoccupied with the primal menace of the 7th Legion, the 7th and 14th Legion were nearing completion of Castrum Novum, a formidable outpost in the corner of Mordona. The Castrum would play a crucial role in Nael van Darnis' Eorzean campaign, housing within its walls a replicated lunar transmitter. Little time passed before Castrum Novum caught the attention of the master and engineer Cid non Garlean, founder of Garlean Ironworks, and refugee from Garlemald, whose vast knowledge of Magitech weaponry had proven invaluable to the Eorzean leader. Garlean had learned from intercepted documents that some manner of transmission apparatus was being erected in the fortress, and knew all too well what the Garleans were plotting, for he was the son of none other than Midas non Garlean, leader of the first phase of the Meteor Project, who perished in the fateful experiment at the Bosnian Citadel. Conducting further investigation, Conducting further investigation, Garland was alarmed to discover that the lunar transmitter was already operational, slowly but inexorably pulling Dalamud towards the atmosphere on a collision course with the planet. He appealed to the Grand Companies for emergency assistance, and the three leaders of the city-states spared no time in reforming the Eorzean alliance, which had existed in name alone for so long, pooling their military resources for a joint operation. The mission to destroy the lunar transmitter was an ambitious one. A handful of platoons from the Grand Companies would lay siege to the Castrum's front gates as a diversion, while a party of formidable adventurers would infiltrate from behind, dispatching Imperial patrols before entering the inner chamber, to destroy the ceruleum generator fueling the transmitter and render it useless. Morale was high in what was considered a pivotal moment in the Eorzean Alliance's stand against the Empire, and the operation was a rousing success. The band of adventurers engaged both men and magitech within Castrum Novum's walls, and by their hand, the lunar transmitter went up in flames. Footnote: it was during the Alliance's attack on the lunar transmitter that the Imperial Legion first deployed the unmanned magitech known as Vanguards. In addition to being utilized in offensive maneuvers against the Eorzean Alliance, the Vanguards were also placed in defensive postures along the walls of Castrum Novum. To kill a raven. The adventurers had accomplished their objective in deactivating the lunar transmitter. However, they were afforded scarce time to celebrate their triumph, as Nael van Darnis greeted the squadron in the inner chamber. He delivered what the historians would describe as a convoluted tirade at the Eorzean Alliance's brazen attempt to foil his plans, before vanishing from the Castrum. Darnis delivered a final message to the adventurers that was alarmingly clear. Before vanishing from the Castrum, Darnis delivered a final message to the adventurers that was alarmingly clear. The lunar transmitter was no longer needed to bring about Dalamud's fall. Astrological observations thereafter would confirm the Legatus' words. Despite the dismantling of the apparatus, the lesser moon continued ascent. Reconnaissance was immediately dispatched to ascertain Van Darnis' whereabouts, and it was soon revealed that he had fled to the general direction of Kurthus. A council meeting of the Eorzean Alliance was convened, as some surmised that the Legatus had anticipated the storming of Castrum Novum, and was already in possession of knowledge that would ensure the Red Moon's plunge to the surface. Orion J. Augrelt of the Circle of Knowing contributed his own research, linking the Lesser Moon to ancient Alag. The Archon's report also spoke of scores of Allagan ruins in the Fields of Glory, and the leaders of the Alliance had little doubts the Legatus had set course for the Eastern Lowland. 3 reconnaissance units, one from each of the respective Grand Companies, were tasked with surveying the lowlands for signs of Van Darnis, but none survived a barrage of enormous pieces of meteorite fragments that rained down from the Lesser Moon. Observers in the area soon discovered the trajectory of the rock upon the comrade's position was no natural phenomenon, but a deliberate assault in their report to the Alliance. In their report to the Alliance, they spoke of how they witnessed a chain of crags floating above the land, the most central of which was emanating a single beam of light into the heavens towards Dalamud, in the selfsame wise the lunar transmitter had at Castrum Novum. These were the Allagan ruins from the Archon's reports. So it was that the Council of the Eorzean Alliance arrived at the conclusion that, for the sake of the realm's survival, Nael van Darnis must be stopped by any means necessary. A small group of adventurers rose to the task. Sidnon Garlean offered them passage to Riven Road, the center of the floating isles, aboard his airship, the Enterprise. It was there that the adventurers would clash with the maniacal Legatus in a battle to the death. For all the White Raven's power and might, it would be his last stand as the adventurers dealt the final blow. Upon his death, the squadron escaped from Kurthus as the Isles as the islets crumbled, strewing debris across the land. Garlean's airship set course for Gridania, and the adventurers were greeted as heroes. When the council heard the news, Van Darnis was no more. The realm was saved. This jubilation, too. Let me rephrase. And the adventurers were greeted as heroes when the council heard the news. Van Darnis was no more. The realm was saved. This jubilation, too, however, would prove short-lived. Footnote. Harboring considerable misgivings about Garlemald's military approach to expansion, Sidnon Garlean, master engineer and former Garlean minister of industry, and a number of his researchers defected, seeking asylum in Eorzea. The modern and lightweight enterprise was designed and constructed by Garlean immediately following his arrival in Eorzea. Desperation. It was the circle of knowing who bore the dismissal tidings, who bore the dismal tidings. While the Allegan ruins had been destroyed in the battle with Nael van Darnis, the Red Moon remained unwavering in its collision course towards the planet. The headquarters of the Grand Companies were in pandemonium upon hearing the report, until Archon Louisoix proffered an unorthodox, if not desperate, proposal to save the realm from destruction. Solemn prayer. The sage proposed that, by invoking the 12 deities of the Eorzean pantheon, the realm might beseech the higher powers to repel Dalamud back into the heavens and seal away the Allegan relic's power. Needless to say, this notion was met with some criticism. Some pointed out the calling upon the 12 in such a manner would make them no different than the savage beastmen who unleashed the primals upon the land. Others questioned whether summoning the 12 would not render all of Eorzea's people mindless thralls to their influence, as was seen with the beastmen's gods. Archon Louisoix assured his compeers that his proposed invocation was not akin to primal summoning. On the contrary, he would search for a way to entreat the 12 to merely lend their divine power to save the realm. The leaders of the Eorzean alliance accepted the gamble that Archon Louisoix set before them, yet none could deny an underlying feeling of despair, for history had proven time and again that all eras of prosperity must eventually give way to calamity and chaos. Footnote. One of the stones used to invoke the power of the 12 on the eve of the calamity. It is said in the moments before Bahamut unleashed his fury upon the realm, 12-like stones were enveloped in pillars of brilliant white light. It was in fact a primal summoning. Louisoix assured them it was not a primal summoning. It was in fact a primal summoning. There's a couple different ways you can choose to interpret that one, Dallas. One is the nature and how they were chosen to be summoned matters, in how Louisoix went about it. Secondly, it's worth pointing out that the primal incarnation of the 12 and its responding to salvation was only existent for a very, very, very brief point. It effectively was a primal that existed only to do one thing in the salvation of them, and also was broken almost immediately, and that Aether was then immediately transposed to Louisoix. So, like, would the single entity that was an incarnate version of the 12, if allowed to continue to exist, have tempered people? Hard to say. You would hope that its magics would be similar to it, but we don't know. Especially with how many people would have been praying who would have been afraid of that very thing happening. Whoa, halfway there. Whoa. Living on a prayer. As the Circle of Knowing completed preparation for the summoning, they beseech adventurers to serve as its guiding light. These adventurers embarked on pilgrimage to kneel before the marks of the 12, and summon the power of the gods. The Grand Companies did their part by leading the residents of the city-states in fervent prayer, their patron gods as well. In this time of impending darkness, it was said that the entire realm gathered to entreat the heavens with one voice, an Eorzea united by the litanies of its people. As adventurers and small folk alike proceeded according to Archon Louisoix's plan, the Garlean Empire stirred. The Eorzean Alliance received word the remnants of the now leaderless 7th Imperial... The Eorzean Alliance received word that the remnants of the now leaderless 7th Imperial Legion were amassing on the plains of Cartno, where Dalamud was expected to make landfall. This information had come from the most unlikely of sources, Gaius van Baelsar, legatus of the 14th Imperial Legion, who appeared himself before the adventurers making their pilgrimage. The legatus relayed to the adventurers that the men of the 7th Legion had become as fanatical as their commander had before them. They refused to accept Nael van Darnis' death and marched towards the plain at what they claimed was the behest of a man who no longer lived. As Van Baelsar told it, the 7th intended to secure the area around Cartno to ensure none could forestall Dalamud's impact, and that they were ready to defend the plains with their lives. With Van Baelsar's confession, the Eorzean Alliance faced a new crisis. To complete the summoning ritual that Louisoix envisioned, the final invocation would To complete the summoning ritual that Louisoix envisioned, the final invocation would need to be made directly beneath the Lesser Moon. It now became clear that the limited resources of the Grand Companies would first have to contend with the 7th Legion, conquerors of the Eastern Continent and the Empire's elite. The stage was set and the players took their positions. Cartno would bear witness to a decisive battle for the fate of Eorzea. The hopes and dreams of its people pitted against the ruinous desires of an army steeped in madness beneath the encroaching red moon. Footnote: Gaius van Baelsar sought to conquer Eorzea and bring its nations under the imperial yoke. It was for that reason that he bitterly opposed the Meteor Project, as proposed by his fellow legatus Nael van Darnis, who would rather see the entirety of the realm burn. I know these pages have particularly a lot of text, but it will never not be crazy to me that that we've done so many hours of reading. I mean, don't get me wrong too, it's this tiny text, so it's like, I've probably done approaching like 5 hours or so now, and we're not even quite 50 pages in. That's wild. So much knowledge. The Battle of Cartno. The city-states of the Eorzean Alliance steeled themselves for their final engagement. The defense of Ul'dah was left in the hands of the Brass Blades and the Sultana Sworn, as the immortal flames departed for Cartno from the Gate of Thal, east of the city. Passing through this gate was a time-honored tradition for Ul'dah's armies, for it was said that the Keeper of the Dead would grant death once to those who departed from his egress, thus allowing them to avoid a second death on the battlefield. Meanwhile, in Limsa Lominsa, the ink was barely dry on the Galadian Accord when the Maelstrom enlisted the help of powerful pirate factions in securing the plains under the Scarlet Standard. Notorious pirate bands such as the Bloody Executioners, the Kraken's Arms, and the Sanguine Sirens became free companies, invested with full martial authority. The Twin Adders of Gridania departed the Black Shroud with the Elder Seatsier, Kani Senna, flanked by the Wood Whalers and Marksmen of the God's Quiver, with a nominal contingent remaining behind to guard the city. Marching with the Grand Company's ranks were scores of adventurers, wielding mighty weapons they had won in journeys. The armies of the Eorzean alliance assembled in northern Thanalin, proceeding as one north to Mordona, before pushing into the plains from the west. The remnants of the 7th Legion placed themselves in the formation on the eastern edge of the plains, while a detachment from Castrum Sentry would assault the Grand Companies from the rear. The commanders of the Eorzean alliance countered the offensive by dispatching adventurers to keep the Castrum Sentry cohorts at bay, while their front lines advanced towards the Imperial host. Both sides had made their first move, and the Battle of Cartno had begun. As the main infantry of the Eorzean alliance spread out to meet the Imperial forces head-on, Archon Louis Sois arrived and commenced his summoning of the 12 from a promontory overlooking the battlefield. Here he would endeavor to focus their divine powers on Dalamut. The vanguards of both armies clashed as the tide of battle ebbed and flowed in favor of the Alliance, then the Imperials, and back again. The Garleans, however, would soon completely overturn the odds when they deployed the next phase of their strategy. 10 score Magitech Knights, each aboard their own Reaper-class Magitech battle armor. The offensive prowess of these newly developed war machines was overwhelming, and the Alliance's tentative hold on the front lines began to falter. For the Eorzean Alliance, this was the first large-scale operation to combine the efforts of so many different forces. Commanders struggled to properly coordinate the movements of each unit. Ad hoc members of the Grand Companies, such as the pirate factions of Limsa Laminsa and the Alamegans serving among the Imperial Flames, employed tactics that differed from and often conflicted with one another. In that sense, it could be said that the vast army which faced the 7th Imperial Legion in Cartno was little more than a haphazard assemblage of units charging aimlessly forward, with but a common purpose to bind them. The confusion increased tenfold when the Magitech Knights and their Reapers descended upon the Eorzean factions. Whatever orders had been handed down, meaningless now, as every man fought for himself. The Alliance's numbers far exceeded that of any dwindled Imperial Legion, yet the lack of a cohesive strategy meant that the full power of their forces was never brought to bear. The Garleans, while fewer in number, had at their disposal an array of advanced technology and years of conditioning under a strict military regime. Once the Reapers had been deployed, the 7th swiftly gained the upper hand. At this chaotic juncture, the adventurers proved the Alliance's salvation. Those who were sent to dispatch the Legion's diversionary force at Castrum Sentry made their belated debut, quickly joined the fray. They were no strangers to the maneuverings of the Magitech weaponry, and had reinvigorated the Eorzean side by forcibly advancing upon the Legion's Reapers. Through the adventurers' efforts, the Imperials were pushed back, allowing the Eorzean Alliance to claw its way forward once more. Okay, I want to turn off. Since we're talking about Dalamut. Footnote. A group of adventurers assembled in Mordona after answering a call to arms from the Eorzean Alliance. They would engage the Imperial Legion, marching from Castrum Sentry in the vicinity of Silvertear Falls. The Elder Primal, Bahamut. None on the battlefield were prepared for that which brought the hostilities to an end. Upon quitting the firmament and entering the skies above Cartno, the red moon cracked, and from within the iron sphere emerged an ancient primal, the likes of which Eorzea had never seen. According to post-calamity research by the archons of the Circle of Knowing, the primal that the Alligans enslaved within Dalamut was none other than the dread worm Bahamut, last summoned some 5 millennia prior by the horde of dragons on the southern continent of Mericidia, when their motherland was invaded by the Alligan Empire. The vessel broken and Bahamut released from his shackles, the colossal worm took wing to inflict to inflict his millennia of rage upon the realm. The Elder Primal tore away from the Cartnau and rained a fiery hell upon the land. The end. There was truth in Nael van Darnis' incoherent ramblings, addressed to the moon. The legatus was aware of the monstrosity housed within Dalamud, and was heeding Bahamut's plea, freed from his prison. Both the molten shards that rained down from Dalamud and the searing flames which spewed from the Dreadworm's maw were indiscriminate in their paths, and war became an afterthought, as friend and foe alike fled the battlefield in terror. As men of both armies ran for their lives, Louisoix Levior kept silent vigil over Cartnau, unwavering in his efforts to summon forth the power of the 12. Though Louisoix may have failed in his attempt to repel Dalamud back to the heavens, he would not allow Eorzea to bear the brunt of Bahamut's rampage, toiling on borrowed time to seal the Elder Primal away where he could raise the realm no more. Wielding the legendary staff Tupsamati, he drew from the great reservoirs of aether flowing from the land, channeling its strength together with the overwhelming prayers of the people. The power of the 12 manifested itself in complex runes in the sky, in the most powerful sealing enchantment attempted in Eorzean history. Stone marks of the deities that were being nourished by the prayers of the Circle of Knowing were engulfed in the pillars of light, becoming glowing spears that pierced the dread worm, binding him in place as the runes confined him in a new prison. The plains of Cartnau were bathed in the light of the 12, and it appeared that the ritual, despite the fact that all eyes were fixated upon the summoning of the 12, there appear to be no witnesses who can recall with certainty what happened after the Elder Primal was enveloped in the god's light. It is said that Archon Louisoix's powerful spell, combined with the vast emanations of aether, had warped the memories of all who survived, an effect which lingered long after the calamity. What is known for certain, that by the time the light of the 12 had dissipated, Bahamut was no more. The same token, the faces of Eorzea's heroes, the adventurers by whose deeds Archon Louisoix's incantation came to pass, were lost to history. So it was that Eorzea plunged into the 7th Umbral Era. Footnote: Dalamud looms in the sky above Cartnau, bathing the plains in an eerie red glow. It is said that this ominous illumination, together with the chaos and confusion of war, led many to believe that the battle was being fought in the 7th Hell itself. Footnote: Several golden shackling mechanisms, known as neurolinks, were bolted onto the corporeal flesh of the Elder Primal Bahamut. Information gleaned from the research of historical artifacts suggests that they were but one of many devices fashioned by ancient Alag to subjugate and imprison beings of considerable power. Aftermath. After Bahamut broke free from his fetters, the fields of Cartnau descended into chaos. The commanders of the Eorzean Alliance ordered a full withdrawal to save as many lives as they could from the indiscriminate fury of the Primal. Military records state that General Raban of the Immortal Flames was hesitant to order a retreat after the adventurers had regained the line, but he yielded at the insistence of his compeer, Connie Senna of the Twin Adders. As their link pearls had fallen silent due to the massive ethereal disturbances attributed to Bahamut, the commanders were forced to deliver their orders by officers on foot. Maelstrom Command often claimed that Admiral Morweb Blufisflin rode down to the battlefield herself on her beloved chocobo steed Victory to halt the pirate bands who bravely fought on even after the Primal emerged. Yet there was no victory to be had at the Battle of Cartnau. The Eorzean Alliance formally withdrew their companions from the plains, and the remnants of the 7th Imperial Legion warriors, known for their brutal conquest of the realm over, scattered, fled in all directions. After the retreat, the troops of the Eorzean Alliance scaled back to northern Thanalin. It was there that the immortal flames established a camp, swiftly tending to the wounded and tallying the survivors amongst the ranks. The Maelstrom suffered a blow during the withdrawal when Admiral Merlwyb sustained a grave wound that saw her removed from the battlefield. Serving in her stead, Grand Storm Marshal Enzar Slafirson gave the order the Maelstrom fall back to Limsa Lominsa. The twin adders, however, would not return to the Shroud for some time, as Connie Senna volunteered her troops to form search parties and returned to Cartnow, providing assistance to friend and foe alike who lay wounded but breathing on those hellish plains. The compassion of the Elder Seedseer, herself an accomplished healer, would save no small number of men from their fates. Footnote. Countless splinterings of Dalamud rained down on the battlefield at Cartnow, composed of not only the moon's outer shell, but fragments of the inner module which had confined the Elder Primal. Footnote. Shards of Dalamud pierced the earth, producing a gray fountain of aether that crystallized within moments. The amber-colored, corrupted crystals, now seen throughout the realm, these glowing talons, remain a vivid reminder of the devastation wrought by a most remarkable rebirth. It was not only on the battlefield of Cartnow that innumerable lives were lost to the calamity. Many casualties are ascribed to the shattered Dalamud's flaming fragments, which rained down upon the land from the peaks of Kurthis to the deserts of Thanalin. No small number of civilians in Limsa Lominsa perished in a tidal wave that engulfed the coastline, caused when a giant fragment of the fallen moon's outer shell plummeted into the nearby sea. Still, many more perished to the raging firestorms that burst forth, the flaring ball of etheric energy unleashed by Bahamut. Just when all hope seemed lost amidst the chaos and destruction, the land came alive, showed signs of an inexplicable rebirth. The survivors of the calamity believed the Archon Louisoix's invocation of the Twelve's power was the driving force which vanquished Bahamut, and could not be described as anything other than a miracle of the gods. Both speculations and rumors about the invocation would abound, with many speaking of a curious phenomenon in the sky above Cartnow, a brilliant light in the shape of a phoenix. Archon Louisoix's body was never recovered, though fragments of his legendary staff Tupsamati were discovered amongst the debris in Cartnow by Twin Adder's search party. The devastation at the center of Bahamut's rage was absolute, making the details of what truly occurred on that fateful night subject to vigorous debate among the scholars for generations. Whew. I mean, the Crystal of the Dying might matter, but mainly what we're led to believe, Dallas, is that it's the tears to the earth, not the tears of people. That was like the cryptic crystals are mainly a byproduct of rends to the land. Don't just Dallas, instead of saying like a certain, not everyone may have done it. So can you just refer to specifically what you're talking about? Okay, okie dokie doke. Do I have time Okay, so you know how we spent like the past 2 times reading a whole bunch of history? So once I finish the like catch-up history, so I'm gonna have to do the entirety of the chronology, and then I'm gonna have to do the entirety of The Realm Reborn through Heavensward Story. We have so much reading to do. Holy shit on a brisket. Oh my god. Oh man. Okay, so we're at page 47. Well, okay. So I only have 30 pages of like heavy reading to get through. That's not so. Before we get into like the non or recappy stuff. What you making me gathering quests from miners, but Eorzea's Aether rich, so lands Aether. So okay, so one, I wouldn't say gather, like make sure the like thank you for saying the what you making, because if you say a certain gather quest, then I literally would have assumed you meant like the like level 10 stuff. So thanks for the clarification of what you making. Secondly, it is his belief, yes, that when the meteor struck and rent the land, that the Aether of his loved ones would have been caught up in it. By that, it's his belief. And the stones in his mind are that the manifested crystals are in a byproduct of that. We don't know for sure that I do think that it would be fair to assume that corrupted crystals formulated by the rents of the land's Aether, if someone was caught up in the rending of the land or the destruction from that their corporeal Aether, not their soul, but their corporeal Aether would be drawn into that. It wouldn't be the weirdest thing, yeah. Wouldn't be our first 100 episode stream series. Yeah, that's fair. I mean, to be fair, if we keep current pace, so I did started at 1:30. I did about 2 hours so far. 2 hours got me. Let's actually take a second. Let me take a break to calculate this out. Just okay, so page 35 to page. I did 10 pages in 2 hours, almost exactly. Now, these are really dense pages, so I actually think we'll go faster through some of the later pages. But if we take that as our most conservative estimate, 10 pages, 2 hours. So that's 5 pages each hour. And there are about 250 pages left. So, you know, that's what? 25... times 2, so about 50 hours. So probably about 25 sessions in order to get through all of this at current pace, if I do 2 hour sessions rather than long. Have a good one out there. Don't forget we got book club tonight. Okay, so here's the question. I might call it there just because I've got a headache, and I just mainly wanted to get started. I might keep trying to do this at least once a week, at least 2 hours. But I've also want to put time towards, I've been working on my electrope script, so I'm going to probably make sure to post that. But I should keep trying to do at least one of these a week for at least 2 hours is continue to be my goal. So, and it'll be on Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday each. It will be one of those days. And if I have a bunch of time, I may take an entire week to just like plow through it. But yeah, obviously nothing new so far, but I'm enjoying this process, and I'm also hopeful that in the long run it'll be useful. My question now is, when I get to the final product, do I use music in the background or not? I think a lot of people don't like a lot of people really like having music. Without music, it's like almost weird for them, but other people I think really find music distracting. So, but yeah. So, friendly reminder, don't forget to check out Final Fantasy XIV Archived. Ray's got stuff going on up there. I just put out a short recently on Naming Way, if you haven't checked it out on the main channel. And the next video that'll be up is a video on Electrope. No promises on when. My hope is to try and get it out before before the middle of October. I hope. We'll see. No promises. Okay. Infinite or Ray, could either one of you guys do some of all the good shit on the as we close it all out? Also, friendly reminder, we've got Lore Book Club over on the Discord. We've got Discord, discord.gg/Eorzean Archives, where you can join us. We've got our book club tonight. That is the Friday event. I believe the topic today is favorite background characters and talking about the short stories, as we've been getting new short stories for Dawn Trail. But yeah. Next time, the section that we're going to be covering for this will be... Hopefully, I'll try to do a longer session, and we'll do pages... Let's see. So, pages... I've got... So that's 30 pages. Let me be 6 hours. My hope next time is we'll get to actually chapter 3, Her Children. That is a lot of reading, so I wouldn't be surprised if we ended up pausing after we like finish the ARR section though. So probably maybe like half that. Yeah, we'll see. Okay. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your weekends and have a good time. Thanks for joining in, and I hope to see you guys real soon. Yep. Cheers, everybody. Have a good one, Novaki.